Hey, welcome to episode number 7, Purgatory Perceptions. We got a good show. I like this show. We're talking with a couple of my longtime friends. We're going to hear some music from one of them, even though they're both musicians. Because of health concerns, we weren't able to meet everyone in person, so there's some Zoom. I really try to stay away from Zoom, but with all the snow and all the health concerns before the holidays and things of that nature, it was the responsible thing to do. So we hope you enjoy episode 7 of Purgatory Perceptions. Thanks a lot for checking it out. First, we're going to hear from my longtime friend, great pianist, composer, teacher, Adam Birnbaum. I've known him, we talked about that a little bit. I've known him for, couldn't figure it out, 19, 20 years. Great composer, great pianist. You're going to hear all that, but an interesting guy, interesting mind, and we definitely had a different trajectory. So it's good to talk to someone who you've known for so long, but you don't know a lot about them. So yeah, check out the interview with Adam. probably looked them up.
Oh, yeah?
All these years.
Very late to know.
talk to my friend Noah Becker. Noah, I met him as a saxophone player, but as you'll discover, he's multi-talented. His latest endeavor is his magazine, White Hot Magazine, which is an art magazine. We'll talk about that and how he got into that. We'll also talk about how he's a painter, and he did both painting and music at the same time. I met him as a saxophone player, but he's a really interesting guy. We had a good talk, so yeah, here's a little bit of that. Take one and the only take. Man, you know what? It looks really stupid to do it, but when you don't have that slate and you're trying to figure out what audio goes with what video and if all the cameras are at the right spot, it's really, oh man. Oh, anyway. It's weird to see you. We always just talk on the phone, and then I see your cool pictures on
Instagram.
Yeah, which I took some more screenshots today. I was like, man, Noah's got some hip shots.
Yeah, I mean, it's always like you get to the point where you see these people who are kind of sophisticated or famous or interesting people, and then they get on social media or they get on Instagram or something, and then you see all these posts about like how they can't use social media properly and how do you do this and how do you do that technically, and it's just like all these 20th century people like trying to do this 21st century thing. But and now it's just old hat. It's been around for so long. It's just like,
but don't you feel like creativity is creativity?
You end up sounding so dated if you start trying to complain about how you don't know how to do this and you haven't mastered that. And,
I just see it all as, I'm starting to see it all as tools.
I just get to the point where I start to feel like I'm doing a TED talk at Best Buy or something if I talk about technology too much. You know what I mean? Like everybody's technology obsessed. They're either politics obsessed or they're technology obsessed, or you know what I mean? It's just like,
I feel like it's just another way to get our message out. Like you did it with the magazine.
That was a weird thing because when they first started Facebook is when I first started the magazine.
How did that start?
Well, I was kind of like, screw this. I don't need to like use somebody else's platform. Like I didn't even know what social media was in 2007, or I think it was like around that time that I started using Facebook.
Right.
Because one of my girlfriends suggested that I should use it because I was on Friendster. Do you remember Friendster?
Right. Yeah.
Jurassic. This is like Jurassic social media talk. And I got off Friendster and I went to Facebook, and I was one of the first people posting about contemporary art on Facebook and had the White Hot Magazine group on there. And in a certain way, I think once I started the magazine as a website, it was kind of like linked into Facebook. And when Facebook really took off, I think it kind of definitely raised the profile of the magazine because I was kind of dumping fans from Facebook towards the magazine.
Oh, so it started off as like a group.
It was a group and it was also a website. But there were no magazines really taking social media that seriously at that point. So I got a lot of people following White Hot Magazine on Facebook, and then when Facebook really grew, it kind of pulled a lot of the stature of what I was doing like a little bit up.
Oh, that's
and now there's just like tons of people talking about art on Facebook as it's over.
Right. But it's important to like find your niche early. So you had no idea to start a magazine. It didn't start like, hey, I want to start an art magazine.
There was that in there as well, and that kind of happened simultaneously. Sort of in when I was in almost kind of a near nervous breakdown mode, where I was so frustrated with my career and with what I was doing. I could just see this long range thing that, like, if I kept doing what I was doing, that 10 years down the road, I wouldn't be any further ahead. And then I had to make some kind of drastic action to change the course of my life so that it would end up being closer to the way I wanted it. And then, of course, in the midst of doing that, other things open up and you discover other pathways, and it doesn't go exactly as you wanted it to, but it kind of, the effort paid off anyway.
Right.
I guess.
That's really interesting, because when I met you, you were a saxophone player living in Brooklyn. But I remember being in a session, and it was like this huge, like from the floor to like maybe 5-6 feet up, canvas. And I was like, who did that? Like,
well, you came over to where I lived and you did a session in the living room with J.D. Allen.
Right. And you had the poster in there, or the painting in there.
I had some stuff in there, but it wasn't like, I mean, that was kind of a weird house in a way, in a strange way, because Terry, I don't know, do you remember Terry Dean at all? Did you ever meet him?
Yeah. He like was fixing people's horns,
Right.
and stuff like that. Yeah. But how did it come that you were making that like kind of sideways, like dabbling in one and dabbling in the other, like you? Because I knew you only as a saxophone player.
I started out as a saxophone player.
Right.
And then 3 or 4 years after I started playing saxophone, I went to art school. But I was still playing the saxophone.
So you were art school in New York or in Canada?
Canada.
Okay.
I was still playing the saxophone while I was going to art school. And I started doing gigs while I was in art school. And then eventually, the people I was doing gigs with locally in Victoria were all like, well, we're moving to New York to take over the jazz scene. And everybody was in their 20s. And
to take over.
Yeah. Speaking of another guy that passed away at an early age, did you ever remember Josh Dixon? Did you ever meet that drummer?
The name sounds really familiar. I bet you if I saw his picture, I would know who.
He was from Canada. He passed away at an early age as well, but he was one of those people on the scene out here that was going to New York. Terry Dean went to New York. Sean Drabbett went to New York.
Oh, Sean, I would know.
And they had been in New Orleans, and they were doing more international things than I was with jazz as a career.
Right.
I was, it takes depending on who you are, it takes a long time to get to the point playing the saxophone where you can actually play with good people. It's a difficult instrument to get anywhere with. It takes a lot of years. Some people are just total prodigies with the saxophone.
Right.
It took me a long time to get to the point where I could play with people at your level,
Yeah, I often think if I played the saxophone, I probably would have done something else, because
the saxophone can just sound so terrible if you don't play it the right way.
And it's like most of the time those guys had to be a leader with some kind of concept so early.
It's like there's a certain personality. I have kind of like a take charge personality. And if you're a leader and you're a drummer or a bass player or whatever, you just kind of, people are looking to you for what's happening or you're learning together or whatever it is, but you kind of have to be able to do that.
Yeah, that seemed tricky on the saxophone, because like I said, you have to do it so early. I being a drummer, I just wanted to play with the best people. So I just played with whoever I could play with until I could play with the people who I wanted to play with. And it just was this natural transition to where everyone was looking to me, where I was the benefactor leader, like just by experience or by age or whatever. What happened with you that made you decide that you wanted to be a leader or
just instrumentation wise? I mean, ordinarily the saxophone is a leader. Right. I mean, obviously the bass or the drums can be a leader, or the piano, or any of the instruments can be the leader in a group context. But generally people, when you're a saxophone player, you're not just a sideman, unless it's maybe like some kind of rock band or something like that.
Right.
where
Was
they need a
Tim
2-bar sax solo. You know?
Tim Reese with the Rolling Stones or
They
something?
need a 2-bar sax solo right here.
Exactly. And play it just like the record. So you've done like a lot of interesting things. We talked about the painting, and we talked about the fact that you play the saxophone. But
Right.
every time I look around about you, or like Google you, or see you pop up, you always wind up doing the most interesting things. I saw you wound up at Art Basel, and then
Yeah.
the thing I wanted to ask you about was, how did it come that, speaking of the saxophone and hanging with different people, you were with Ornette Coleman making a movie? Like,
It's funny.
I didn't know you made movies.
Well, I got to the point where I was like, I had this idea, and I was like, oh no, not another idea. And then I heard somebody say that film is the most powerful medium.
Huh.
Because the person is basically just like hypnotized, and they're sitting there for like an hour and a half, and there's these flickering lights going at XYZ amount of speed, and and then by the time they're out of there, it's almost like they get put into a dream state.
I can see that.
Whereas with other things, they're not necessarily put into a hypnotic dream state with everything. So that's why they say film is the most powerful medium, because people are just, even if it's a totally crappy movie or whatever, there's still these hundreds of seconds. I can't remember the mathematics of how many frames go around or whatever it is with video, but there's like all this information that's just fed into your eyes at high speed.
Right.
So I thought, oh, well, if I do that, then that will really enhance what I'm doing. And also I was hanging out with a lot of famous people, and I knew a lot of famous people, and I was like, my life is not normal anymore. I have to document this, because the time will come where I can't, and I'll go, damn, I should have been filming that whole time.
Right. So you have this epiphany that I need to be documenting this, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do
And
you get a camera, like, or do you hire?
well, all of that stuff, and I've told this to people before, strangely enough, all of that stuff, the follow through is another thing, but like I had the great fortune of being invited to sit in at the Village Vanguard, which to someone like you is not that big of a deal, because you do that kind of stuff all the time.
No, it's a huge deal.
Okay.
What I wouldn't give to be playing in the Village Vanguard right now.
So it was David Murray.
Oh, right.
And I happened to meet his son, Mingus, who's a very interesting individual. He also works in the art world. I happened to meet him and his mother, her name is Ming Smith, and she's a very important photographer. And she was married to David Murray.
Okay.
At one point. And I started talking to them, and he said, oh, well, I'm a guitar player. I just met them at this after party for an artist named Mick Thomas, who's a fairly prominent Black artist internationally. And they were having a party at a hotel lobby, an after party for something during one of the art fair weeks. And it was mostly a lot of Black artists and musicians at this party, because it was Mick party, and I guess that crowd was a certain kind of like Illuminati level or something. like like people from the Roots on the TV show, or people who were collaborating with major international jazz or new soul or whatever it was, and contemporary artists showing at MoMA, and the ethnicity of it was just what it happened to be. It wasn't specific. I didn't think about that specifically when I went there. I was just going to a party. But when I happened to get there, there were a lot of people who were associated with the Black art community there.
Okay.
Curators, famous art, like some of the most famous artists in New York of that group of people, like Derek Adams is a very well-known, excellent artist from, I don't know if you've heard of him. You probably have.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know Jason Moran personally, but I'm thinking he might have been there. Somebody from his crowd of people might have been there. And then other people from like the Whitney and Museum of Modern Art and whatever. So I'm at the party and I start talking to David Murray's son. And I didn't know who he was. I just thought he was cool and his mom was cool, and started talking to them. And then through that, I ended up playing with that group at the Village Vanguard. But that was entirely, my point is, that was entirely through the art world.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of like if you get to the very top of the music world, or you get to the very top of the art world, everybody starts to show up at the same party.
Exactly. Yeah.
Especially in New York. As far as Ornette goes, that was also through the art world. It wasn't through the jazz world, really. Although the awareness and the follow through and the ability to play and the ability to interact was.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't see him hanging out if you didn't have anything to talk about or
Right.
weren't talented. And
well, I was at my friend. I've had a lot of friends die in the last couple of years at a young age. It's disturbing. Yeah. So anyways, my good friend who died a few months ago at the age of like 51. I was over at his studio. Michael Anderson was his name. He's a collage artist. And I said, I'm making a film. I met this.
At this point, what had you done to make a film? Like,
I'd never made a film. I just met a film student in Canada who was going to the film school at the university, and invited him to come to New York and make a movie about my life in New York, because I saw a trailer on his phone for a movie that didn't exist, that he just made a fake trailer as an assignment. And I was like, can you do those production values with a full-length movie? And we can go to New York and meet all of these famous people and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, oh yeah, I'll ask my dad. He was really young, His guy by the name of Stephen Lane, and very talented guy. So he collaborated with me and knew about editing and knew about what cameras to use and all of that, and that really enhanced the thing a great deal. And so when I was over,
that's what stops people from doing all this amazing stuff, starting a magazine.
Yeah, I mean, I'd never started a magazine either. I had no idea.
Yeah. So you got him a place to stay or something, and said, come and stay for what, a couple weeks,
I rented rooms at the Chelsea Hotel.
The classic right there on 14th and wow.
Yeah, like before they renovated it and before they changed it up so that it's like a construction zone for a boutique hotel.
Wow.
And we did a lot of the interviews in the hotel rooms.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Where can I find this movie?
It's just on YouTube. It's called New York Is Now, and it was made about 10 years ago.
Okay.
And it's a whole like interview journey through the lives of 38 different artists through my perception of 38 different artists and their work. Quite. Ornette wasn't in that one. Ornette was supposed to be in the sequel.
But I've seen some pictures of you like playing saxophone with Ornette.
Yeah, I did that. I did that for the sequel to the first movie, but the second movie didn't come out. I just released a 20-minute short with me and Ornette, which is also on YouTube.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so that's the full Ornette thing. And he gave me a lesson and I played his horn and we hung out. Like a friend of mine that I was talking about happened to be friends with Ornette for like 7 years. And when I was over at my friend's art studio, he said, oh, you're making a movie. Like, well, my friend is a saxophone player.
I love when people do that. You go to the house and it's Ornette.
Like, what's your friend's name? Like, Ornette Coleman. I was like, You mean Ornette or Nat?
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of
Okay, I'll
Ornette.
call him right now. And he called him and he was like, okay, I talked to Ornette. We're going to go over there on Tuesday. So we go up this elevator. We go over this building on 36th Street. We go up the elevator. It's one of those elevators that opens right into the loft.
Mm-hmm.
And there's Ornette standing there in like a shiny suit with a blue tie, like dressed to the nines.
Yeah, he's always kind of dressed up like that. Every time I've seen a picture of him or something, or like he's always.
And then he started getting kind of weird, like kind of put off because he didn't know me, and he was just kind of like, it seemed like he was in a weird mood. And then and he went up into his music studio and closed the sliding glass door. It was kind of like a soundproof door, and he was just in there as if we weren't there. And my friend was kind of like, oh, he's usually not like this. You know, I don't know what's wrong with him today. And it's like, and then said, well, he knows we're coming. He knew we were coming. He obviously greeted us. So why don't just go in there and talk to him. So they put me in there and I sat down at the table with Ornette and he's sitting there.
Huh.
And I'm like kind of freaking out, you know, because like to me, after years of being a fan of what he does, it's like being put in a room with Coltrane or Charlie Parker or something like that.
Right, exactly.
Like something out of a weird dream / fantasy or something.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine.
It was weird. And he was just kind of hanging his head. And then eventually he made some jokes. And
I always wanted to. There was a period where lots of different New York musicians were going to his place and coming back with these amazing stories. And I know Charlie kept saying, man, we got to go over to Ornette's. And, you know, I missed my boy. Did you want to put it out in studios or did you want to do something?
I wanted to put it into film festivals, but we didn't succeed in getting it to many film festivals because it was just sort of a last minute project. And then I ended up screening it at a lot of different venues and sort of private film festivals and museums and galleries and stuff like that for art audiences. And during Art Basel and at Soho House and all these different places. And
so what's the timeline like of this? Like, is the movie happening at the same time? Because I remember it was like, I know Noah, the saxophone player, we're playing a session and then I go on the road, look around and it's like, Noah's a painter. And I said, wait, what? It's like, oh yeah, I do remember years ago, he had that canvas at that place. Then you're at Art Basel and doing all these things, and I'm seeing you. We went to your show in Midtown, like near off of 9th Avenue.
Oh yeah, I think maybe you did. Where?
What was it? Was it the Armory or something?
Something like that. Yeah, something like that. I can't remember.
So I came to that, and I was like, okay, wow, Noah's a big time artist. Okay, cool. Then it's like, wait, he has a magazine? Like, what's the timeline and how? What's the workflow like?
Well, I came to New York when I met you, I came to New York for the first time in 1997, along with some of those Canadian jazz musicians that were really, really tuned into the international jazz world and really ambitious in the jazz scene. And really, really great at what they were doing. And I hung out in New York from 1997 till 2001 when the whole World Trade Towers thing happened, when I witnessed.
Okay, right. Where were you when that happened?
I was in Prospect Park West, so I wasn't like super close, but I could see the towers clearly from my rooftop.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was traumatic, and then I came back here to Victoria, and I was here for 10 years.
Okay, so from what 2001 to 2011 or something like that, 2012.
2010, basically, yeah, the end of 2010.
So what was happening for you?
Well, I was painting and I was playing the saxophone in Victoria here locally and a little bit in Vancouver. Um, and I started to get fed up with my art career. I wanted to have more international outreach. And I was going between Victoria and Miami for Art Basel at different times. And I just got really fed up, and I decided to start an art magazine.
So what was the state of your art career, and what did you get fed up
Well, I
with?
was showing with a lot of different galleries in Miami and New York and different places like that, but I just didn't feel like I was being respected the way I wanted to be respected. I didn't feel like the fame and success that I was looking for on the scale that I was looking for it was
That's
really
interesting. Most people never actually admit that they had
well.
some fame level that they wanted, and they either attained it or they didn't attain it.
Well, it's funny. It's like I've had a lot of interaction with people like Joshua Redman and Kurt Rosenwinkel in the jazz world, and people that are wise people, people that have a sort of a sense of what being an international phenomenon or a creative genius internationally or something like that means. And they said some things to me back in the 90s that really stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, Josh Redman, just one time he was over at the house because he used to get his saxophone. Him and Michael Brecker and a few other people used to get their saxophones fixed by Terry at my house. So they would hang out. And I remember talking to Josh Redman one day, and he goes, Noah, if people tell you that they're not interested in everyone in the entire world knowing what it is that they do creatively, they're probably lying to you.
You know, there's certain people that were ahead of their time with certain things. Like I think about a lot of the talks that Prince had,
Right.
talking about, you know, he called himself the artist because that's what they call people in the contract, the artist.
Right.
And you hear Dave Chappelle and various artists around the world fighting for their contracts. Streams. That's what.
Well, someone like Jimi Hendrix had an effect on politics and society in a way that kind of transcended just playing and innovating on, besides his innovations on rock guitar. I really got into epistemology at one point, which is sort of like the study of why we know what we know. That's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean,
Self-awareness.
self-awareness.
Know what we know.
Self-awareness is nice. I mean, you're a genuine continuation of the jazz tradition in drumming, or at least closer to the tradition of jazz drumming than a lot of,
I just wanted to play like people I liked.
Yeah, I mean, people like
doing what I was doing.
Right.
Did you feel like that when you were making a magazine? Did you know that like one day this is going to be like a major key in my life when I start this Facebook?
I wasn't aware of how much bigger it would get than expected. And once it got to a certain point, I was like, well, this is actually doing me some good, so I should and it's doing the world some good, so I should probably maintain it for the good of the community and my own good. But I didn't expect it to be such a going concern that I would have to make a decision as to whether to like manage it or not.
And then it got there one day where you turned around and you said, wait a minute, like this is.
Yeah, I mean, I have to manage it. I have an assistant that works with me and team of freelance writers and different people, and
it became a whole thing.
This morning was kind of a weird. There's always like some kind of weird thing that happens. Like this morning, yesterday sometimes they'll do the publishing for me, so I'll just read it after.
You wake up and read your magazine.
Yeah, or edit it after.
What's my magazine looking like today?
That was kind of what it was like. It was like, what's going on? And then I opened up Instagram, and there were all these people that were liking and following the magazine, like a couple hundred of them. And I was like, something's going on here. So they had published an article about Norman Reedus, who's the lead character in a show called The Walking Dead, but it's like the #1 show on some cable, or so I can't remember exactly. But he's like the guy that has the bow and arrow guy who shoots bow and arrows through the skull of zombies.
I don't watch TV.
I don't watch the show. I've watched it a few times. I know who the guy. I recognize the
I
actor.
probably would know if I
The
saw him.
famous actor, but he's also happens to be an art photographer.
Huh.
And somebody wrote an article about his art. And then he posted to this morning a link about this article about his art in my magazine. He posted it on Instagram. And it had something like 39,000 likes in 2 hours.
Wow. What
It was just like
okay,
really
but something just jumped out at me. First of all, that's amazing. But what is art photography in your estimation?
Well, if you know how to do composition and light and dark, and I mean, there's a lot of filters and a lot of ways to sort of make photography kind of look like art photography on Instagram or on social media or whatever. And there's fans for that, but there's a history with art photography the same way there's a history with jazz drumming or saxophone playing or painting, or and to the connoisseurs, they recognize the people that are really innovative. And that's kind of the job of an art magazine, or the job of writers or scholars, to like really know what's up.
To sift through all that for people like me that are confused. They're like, is that a painting? Is that a filter? Or like we
Right.
talked about a lady, Emily, and I looked at her paintings recently, and I thought they were pictures, like photos.
Mm-hmm.
And as I read the caption, it's like, oh no, she painted that.
Yeah, and a lot of people really get off on that. They're like, that's like kind of a technical thing in painting. That's a very basic reaction, I think, for a lot of people, is like, that looks like a photograph.
And they get.
And I think that people do respond to the ghost of a photograph, or the way that a photograph frames something up, and it's just like a complete kind of thing. Personally, I try to be influenced more by Renaissance painting, or if I have photography involved, I'll somehow piece it together with old art and create a new image.
Cool.
All right.
So, how you been, man?
Oh, pretty good. You know, just finished up my long teaching day.
Oh yeah, what's that?
Well, you know, Thursdays is my long day at Purchase, but it's not so bad anymore that the combo is not meeting anymore. You know, everyone left campus, so just do a bunch of ear training classes and then I'm done.
Oh, okay. Ear training. Wow,
Yeah.
sounds painful.
You know, it's actually amazing. You know, everyone thinks it's like, oh, it's like taking your vitamins or like something, you know, exercises that no one wants to do, but it's basically just singing stuff, you know. So we sing jazz solos, we like extract little information from different solos and look at different harmonic things and try to work on hearing them. It's really all about just like hearing different things, you know, in a jazz context.
Oh no, I feel like all the exercises and everything are good. I just don't want to hear some like drummer singing.
Well, yeah.
Or like some like trombone player, like.
Well, that is the challenge of that class. Yeah, is you got some kids that are just ready for everything, and they can hear all this stuff, and then you got some kids that you're like, sing this note, and the guy's like, you know, and then you know, like, no, that's not the note. Let me play it again. That's the note. You know, that gets to be tiring.
Some of these people, I'm like, do you even play music? Do you even like music? Like,
I know. That's how I feel sometimes too. It's like, man, it's like if learning how to sing like a Charlie Parker solo is a drag for you, then like you're probably not meant to play this music.
Yeah,
you know?
maybe do something else.
Like that doesn't. I mean, I think that's pretty fun. Like that's what I would want to do in my spare time, you know. But maybe that's just me.
Yeah, man. Speaking of which, how long have we known each other? I feel like when I met you, you were in Juilliard, or did we meet before that?
Yeah, no, I think we met at Juilliard. Yeah, I was there 2001 because I moved right before 9/11, so it's really easy to remember, you know.
Right.
And yeah, we met. I don't remember exactly how we first met, but I know we played sessions at Juilliard together, like right when I was in school there.
They made a
I was.
rule, especially for me.
Oh yeah, that was after my recital.
the
That's right.
the no
Yeah,
Rodney rule. Nah, I was up there so much with you, Craig Pelasco.
exactly. Yeah, I think the first time we played together was with Craig, and he's probably actually how we met, I guess. We played a session with Craig up at Juilliard. I definitely remember that.
And then I met Brewer around the same time. That's back before they fixed the school all up like they have it now. It's all pretty and like that's back before they really considered jazz important at the school. Right? You
Yeah, I
guys were
mean,
kind of stuffed in there, I remember.
yeah, I mean, sometimes we called ourselves guinea pigs because they put us in there, but like not everyone in the school knew we were there and knew what to do with us. And, like our big band rehearsals, we had to walk uptown to a church because they didn't have any space for those rehearsals, so we just left campus and just rehearsed in this church on 79th Street.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, so yeah, all those issues have gotten sorted out now, and now like the facilities are set for everything. Yeah,
Right.
it
Now it
was
seems like
different.
jazz is really important up there now, like with Winton running the program and the whole thing.
Well, yeah, that program's been through a lot of regime changes, and yeah, I mean, even originally Winton was kind of one of the founders, but he stepped back from actually running the program, and I guess it seems to be working now that he's not officially in charge, but I don't know what his official role is exactly, but Aaron Flagg is the official director there.
Oh, right, right,
But
right, right, right.
but then Winton is sort of like overseeing everything from above. He's just not there every day, but he's there very frequently, kind of checking in and see
Right,
what's
he got
going
my
on.
man to do the heavy lifting, and I'll come in and tell you like how to fix stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So, was that time? What did you do with that time there? Because I feel like we were always playing, but like you seem to be pretty well studied already at that point. And they
I
didn't really
mean,
have teachers for you, right?
I studied there with Kenny Barron. That was
Mm.
my private teacher, and that was great. Actually, oddly enough, at first I didn't like it because this is how stupid I was when I was a kid. I was so excited to study with Kenny Barron. He was one of my idols. And then what we did is we would just play tunes in a room together. We'd have two pianos, and we would just call tunes. And if I didn't know the tune, he would show me the changes, and we would just go. And I was a little disappointed, to be honest, because I didn't realize that's how you learn. I wanted him to show me like what's that lick you played here, and like show me some secret like jazz tricks and devices that someone like Kenny Barron knows. And after a while, I finally woke up to the fact that that's not how it works. Like that's not how the music is learned. So he was actually just doing the best thing for me, which is like just every week, just kick my butt. Just let's go, let's play a tune. And
Right. You probably got much much stronger from that, more so than like my granddad used to say, you don't know what you don't know. So
right.
these kids go to the doctor and want the doctor to give them the prescription that they want, but you don't know what you don't know. Do you find after having that experience teaching and now doing so much teaching, do you meet kids that had that kind of attitude you had then? Do you try to pull their code or?
Yeah, sometimes it's hard. You have to find the right balance between like being firm with people and telling them what they need to know, but not in a mean way that might discourage them. It depends on the student too, right? Like some people can handle really being told like, "Man, you sounded like crap on that. You need to get that
Yeah, not
together."
not so much that point, but just the kids who you're teaching them the real way, things that's really going to help them, and they want to lick. I find when
Mm,
I'm teaching drum lessons, I teach a thing that like, it's what I'm practicing. It's like this is what you're going to be practicing probably for the rest of your days. And I find that maybe I would be more successful if I gave people like an easy bake oven kind of like at the beginning of the lesson, we're going to have these ingredients. And at the end of the lesson, we'll have a muffin. And it's
right.
like the real stuff, like your ear
Yeah.
training. It's like you don't get a muffin in 30 minutes. Like,
Exactly. And that's, let's face it, like the internet and the way things are these days with social media and all that, there's like a lot of stuff out there that's saying, look, learn these 3 licks and you can play jazz.
Right,
Like
right.
there's a whole like world of people trying to go in that direction to sort of lure in customers and promise like sort of fake promises. But yeah, all the serious practitioners of jazz know that all the meaningful things you work on take place over like many years of doing simple things and really focusing on them. And certainly young people don't always want to hear that because they want like the most glamorous, like quickest way to sound really good fast. So I just think you just have to keep being honest about it. I mean, you can sort of dangle carrots and say, look, here's something really cool you can do. Like you can give them little things to make them feel like they're doing something like that,
Right.
just to throw it in there, but just remind them like, but that's not really how you get better. Like your sound is really important. You got to work on your sound. You got to work on technique
Right.
and, understanding harmony fully and all these basic things that take many years to really do.
Yeah, it seems like a very. I heard a good analogy recently that learning to play jazz. I forget who told me this, but they were talking about Ron Carter They asked Ron what other things someone could do to learn about jazz, and he said they can learn to garden. Because it's like, you don't like plant the seed and like get the tree next week. Like you gotta plan and prepare and nurture and.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. And that also extends to your life way outside of specifically practicing your instrument too, right? Because it's really like your whole life, just the way that you are as a person. If you're an artist, you're shaped by everything that's going on. So like
Right.
if you have a family, like your relationships with other people that you're around, if you go out and see a movie or see some artwork, if you go for a run, like that's all part of your musical personality too. So it's like, it's not just sitting in a practice room and learning licks all day. Like it's like a wider perspective on how you grow as a human being, I guess, which is,
Right.
basically what Ron's saying.
Yeah. I was thinking about you the other day because we've known each other for. Well, you said 2001? That long? Really?
Yeah, I mean maybe 2002. I don't remember if I
Yeah,
met you
somewhere
the first
like
year.
18 years or something. Yeah, it was early on. But I realized there's so much I don't know about you. Like I play your tunes all the time. I feel like we've done at least one record together, right? The Smalls Records
Hmm.
thing, maybe something
Yeah,
else. Anyway, but I've played your tunes forever. I feel like even on some of those first sessions, I was playing some of your tunes, but I have no idea how you write them, or like what the process is like, or because I always find that I play most of your gigs. I play without music, like when we
yeah.
were playing Catano, and even last week after like not playing for like 8 months or something, I felt comfortable. So they sound familiar, but they're original. They're your own thing. Like how do you write?
I guess it depends on the tune. But like, let's see, I'll talk about the tunes we play most often because those are the ones that, would make sense. I mean, like Cat's Dance, that one. Originally, I think I wrote that as sort of an exercise in trying to find counterpoint in a jazz piece because I wanted to have just not like a melody on top and some chords, but like different melodies on top of each other, like real counterpoint. So I had this melody up here, and then I had this lower voice, kind of like a tenor voice. And then at one point, the tenor voice kind of takes over the melody and climbs up, and then that becomes the new melody. And so
Oh, interesting.
that was kind of the basic starting point, was like I was trying to hear all these different inner voices, like 4 voices, and follow different melodies. And then it also kind of settled into this groove, of sort of like, I don't even know what to call that. It's sort of like a samba-ish kind of thing, but in 3,
Right.
right? But it kind of lands on beat 2 every measure, like the way a samba does. But I don't know what the proper term for it is. But that was kind of a afterthought from just kind of following the melodic lines and just kind of finding this, these melodies that could kind of interweave on top of one another.
Huh.
But other tunes I've written with a more specific, like that tune we played the other night, that Dream song, the one that goes.
Oh yeah, I like that one.
Huffy. No, it's not Huffy Henry. That's oh man, I can't remember the name of the
Is
tunes
that
right
one of
now.
the ones from the poetry?
Yeah, exactly. So that was inspired by this poetry by John Berryman, and like I won't go too deep into that, but he writes this really intense poetry that's about this person named Henry, which is more or less him, but it's kind of one of those devices where you use this third person to say things that you might not say yourself. And so this guy Henry sort of like speaks on Berryman's behalf, but he sort of distances himself from it emotionally by giving it this other character's name, you know.
Oh,
But it's
I
about a
never
lot
knew
of
that. You always say it and you like go through it briefly, but we're on the gig, so you do kind of like what you just did, like, oh, you know, this is about poetry, blah blah blah, and then we play it. But I was like, what's the story?
yeah, it's true. I mean, I generally get worried that people don't want to sit and hear me talk for 10 minutes about poetry on a gig, but it's possible people might be interested to know a little more about how the song connects to the
Well,
poem.
now's the
But
time, because I
yeah,
was wondering about that.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's a very sad, generally speaking, the poetry is dark because he was a very tragic figure. Like he was an alcoholic and he basically suffered from this really this event where his father went out and killed himself when he was a kid, and he sort of spent his whole life trying to deal with that emotionally. And there's many references to that in the poems and the dream songs about his father and how he went out and shot himself and what that did to him emotionally.
Oh man.
Um, and so that very first poem, Huffy Henry, it's in there right there. Huffy Henry rued the day, right? It starts off with him kind of referring to this dark incident, but not really actually explaining it.
Hmm.
And there's hundreds of these dream songs, so he's coming at it from all these different angles. Um, and you know, I always felt that it had a strong connection to the blues, and he actually has a voice in there who speaks in this sort of like what might be considered offensive kind of minstrel dialogue, where he speaks in sort of a stereotypical like
Hmm.
black. I don't know how you say blackface, but like in a written form, basically, you
Right,
know,
right,
like
right.
the stereotypical way of talking. He uses a voice in that way to sort of represent this other character and bring in all these elements of, let's say, black culture, and could possibly be looked at as racist. I never saw it that way personally. I always felt that it was a sincere attempt to sort of bring in um, this other voice, and it's sort of almost a sarcastic way of like of including this minstrel voice as sort of almost like a comedy side to the whole thing.
Right.
Um, but it definitely has a feeling of the blues in it. And so the Huffy Henry, I kind of thought a lot of those pieces are based on the blues in some way. So that's like a 12 bar blues with a kind of
Oh,
bizarre, irregular form.
I've
But
been
more or
playing this
less,
tune for years. I never knew all that.
yeah, I mean, this part, right, that's kind of the one chord, and then it goes to the four chord, you know, and then back to one again, right? That's the blues. The turnaround is where it's a little different, because the turnaround has like a whole bunch of different chords that you wouldn't normally have in a blues, but
Right.
it's still a 12 bar structure that kind of feels like a blues.
Yeah, the other night when we played it, I really it reminded me of Duke Ellington's record, and his mother called him Bill,
Oh, okay,
and the
yeah.
Far East Suite. That's why I played like that triplet kind of 12/8 kind of feel on it. It really reminded me of Duke Ellington the other day. But
Yeah,
it's
well, I take
interesting
that as a,
to know that
sorry.
backstory.
Yeah.
I said,
Well, I mean,
wow.
I'll take that as a great compliment because Duke is, you know, the ultimate master of writing a blues for his entire life, right? It's like most of his work are 12 bar blueses, but they're all different. And he found so much genius, you know, music by just taking a blues and writing it different ways over and over again, you know?
But it seemed that
So,
it's important to have, in order to get that feeling, it's important to have something behind it. Not just the fact that I'm playing the blues, but why, you know, having the continuum of who, why, where, when, you know, all that whole situation.
sure. Yeah, and the blues is definitely a heavy topic. Especially, I'll just say this as you know, as a white person playing jazz, you know, you
Are
start
you
talking
white?
about the. Oh, I don't see color.
My all-time favorite statement. So try
Yeah,
to catch a cab with me. Let's drive fast and let the police pull us over.
right.
See
But
what
when
colors you see.
yeah, but when you get into the blues, like that's the feeling of the blues obviously gets into some really deep territory as far as slavery and, all
Right.
the feeling of that music came from torment. And, um, I think it's okay to be aware of that and understand it, even if you didn't live it yourself, and you can still kind of, you can play the blues nowadays,
Right. Right.
it's still kind of that feeling, and the music has been passed on to us. But in John Berryman's case, it's a very obscure, reflection of the blues through his very, very overtly intellectual and sort of like, he's also just a Shakespeare geek. And,
Right. I got to check out these poems now.
yeah, they're really intense. They're sometimes very hard to follow because they're full of obscure references, many of which I still don't get. You'd have to be like a serious poetry scholar to get all the references he makes. But I just love the flow of the poetry and how he manages to sort of toe the line of being very emotional and intense, but also very humorous, sarcastic at times. And they're just very intriguing takes on so many different. Each one is like a little tiny miniature on a specific subject,
Huh. Yeah.
So
Poetry, I feel like I need to read it with a dictionary sometimes, or like with a teacher, like, explain this to me now, So I often stay away from it. But that playing that tune so long, I knew something was there, and I knew you wrote it about a book of poems, but I didn't know quite what that deal was. So
yeah.
when I met you, you were starting in school, and now, 18, 19 years later, did you reach the goal that you were starting out with, or like, because I didn't go to school. And I always wonder.
I mean, I think I'm getting there.
Huh.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I was just saying that I didn't go. I think we got a little delay, but I didn't go to school, and I really wanted to at that time, and I definitely wanted to go to a school like Manhattan or Juilliard, but I wonder how much my thing would have changed my whole trajectory, and how useful those lessons were, even if you don't use the degree necessarily. But going to a school like Juilliard, I mean, my parents would have like loved,
Yeah, sure. It's something you could be proud to tell your dad, hey, I'm going to Juilliard.
Right.
I mean, I guess we kind of went through it in opposite directions in a way, because you were touring when you were really young, right? Like a teenager.
Right.
So you got like sort of on the bandstand experience when you were very raw, and so you learned that way first, and then sort of like maybe broaden your perspective gradually later by just playing with different people. Like I kind of learned, I didn't have a lot of gigs when I was at Juilliard, and it took me a bunch of years to really kind of establish a presence on the scene,
Right.
So it was a very slow build for me to get from school to like having a sustainable career and having something that I could feel good about, So like up until March, at least this year, I felt pretty good, but we're all in the same boat as far as that.
You mean you're not going on a 6-week tour tomorrow?
Yeah. It's funny it got canceled. What a shame. No, but I mean, I think, I don't know. I've been able to just kind of stick to what I like, and I've never really been the flavor of the month. Like I've never been on the cover of Downbeat, or I've never been hyped up. And I'm very actually happy with that, sincerely, because I think it's helped me to focus on just developing who I am as an artist and not having to worry about impressing anyone, just not to have that pressure at any point.
I mean, you're in good company not being on the cover of Downbeat.
Right, exactly. You talk about people like Mulgrew that you worked with, and like you can name like, all the greatest musicians who were just consummate professionals. You could throw into this list. But like I felt like it took me a long time to really feel comfortable with who I am as a musician, but having the chance to sort of do that slowly was really helpful to me. Rather than just saying, oh, hey, you're ready to go on tour. I mean, I won that. There was this piano competition, the Cole Porter Fellowship, and I won that when I was very young. I was like 24.
I remember that.
And we did some gigs together through them. Like we would do the Indianapolis Jazz
Exactly,
Festival and stuff.
I remember getting some speakers.
Exactly. The clips. Yeah. I still have those right here. Yeah, those are great. That was a sweet deal.
Right.
But, as nice as it was to have that opportunity, to be honest, like looking back on it, I wasn't really ready as an artist to make a mature statement as a leader at that point. But I did my
But
best,
you take what you get when you get it, man. There's so much
Sure.
weird stuff that happens when something good happens. Like you got to roll with it.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess what I mean is like I'm thankful that I was able to just kind of slowly continue to improve on things. And in fact, one of the things I really appreciate about you, because we've been working together for so long, is we've had many conversations about the music, like before the gig, after the gig.
Oh yeah, that's the
And
vibe.
yeah, that's so important because like you've always been very direct and honest about what worked, what didn't work, and how we could improve. And it's never I never once took it personally like, oh, how dare you criticize what we're doing or whatever. It was always from the point of view of we want to improve as musicians
Yeah, and
together,
I want to
make this
be
better.
here. If I was quiet, that means, all right, next time he calls, I won't be around. I remember playing at the Catano, and you played I've Grown Accustomed to Her Face in an odd key. And then,
Ah,
like,
yeah,
I
in
just
E,
sat
I
there.
remember
I
that.
didn't even play. I just sat there, like, it just struck me so much. We've had some interesting times, but it's like, as much as we've talked about things, I was like, man, there's a lot I don't know. Like, what were some of those first gigs? Like, I always played with you in a trio setting, I feel like. But when did you start going on the road, and with whom?
I mean, I think the first significant gig I had was with Greg Osby, who you also worked with a long time ago too. So we have that connection.
Which
Um,
band? With Brewer and.
yeah, when I joined the band, it was with Matt Brewer and Tommy Crane.
Oh,
Um,
wow, Tommy Crane.
yeah, and we did a bunch of gigs, not too many with that particular group because it honestly it kept changing. Once I was in the band, Brewer got too busy and he left, and then uh, Chris Tordini was doing it for a little bit, and he was using Mike Pinto on vibes, and Sarah Serpa was singing, and Mir
Oh,
Felder was playing guitar, and then Joseph Lepore was on bass. This guy Hamir Atwal was on drums, and then Reggie Quinterly did a week at the Vanguard with us on drums one time. It was like the personnel were kind of constantly changing that time when I was in the band,
wow, yeah, yeah.
which it was cool because I did get to connect with a lot of really talented young musicians. That was the good side of it. The downside was like I feel like we never really got a chance to really gel as a band
Right. The
because there
point
was
of
never
being
one.
in a band is like the same three or four guys, like for a couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I understand correctly, like when you were with Osby, it was you and Jason Moran and the bass player. I'm forgetting
Achi
his
Osada. Yeah.
exactly. It was kind of that group for a pretty long stretch, right?
Yeah. That was. It was an interesting thing because when Greg called me, I didn't even know who he was. Um, and
That's funny.
I definitely didn't know who Jason was, but the idea of like, it's back when you did Wim Wick tours. And you would go to Europe like with a Eurail pass, and you'd be on trains for like 3 weeks, playing every night, like one nighters, and clothes
Yeah,
smell like smoke and the whole deal.
yeah,
It's odd to be talking about that time and be missing it.
yeah.
To be like,
That's
it'd be nice to play one nighters for a couple of weeks.
yeah, that's the thing. We always complain, right? So if we had gigs, we'd be complaining about how they weren't good enough, and now we're complaining we don't have any gigs.
No, it's funny. Like I feel so out of shape because like I was thinking about it today. Um, I haven't really played consistently in months, almost a year, I guess. I haven't really practiced consistently, right? Because you're doing so many other things. But yet, everything I play is a record because it's a
Mm.
live stream. So
Yeah,
it's like I'm making all these records while I'm not in shape.
I think yeah, I feel the same way. Yeah, it's weird. Every time you step to play any performance right now, it's documented and it's on Facebook Live for the next
Right? Three
eternity
cameras
or
in your face. Yeah, three cameras in
yeah.
your face, like real sound, like you're in a studio. Except I haven't interacted with other musicians like in 6 months.
Yeah, and it's definitely a weird feeling. I mean, the feeling of when you've been on the road, even when you're dealing with hardships on the road. Sometimes that's even part of the whole experience. But somehow, like as a band, you tend to either come together or
Right.
maybe you want to kill each other. But usually you come together
Exactly.
through all the difficulties. And by the 12th gig, there's sort of like some magic happening where you don't even have to talk about it. Like it starts to just feel really good. And yeah, we're in the opposite of that right now.
Yeah,
No one has any like cohesive chance to play with people on a regular basis. So
and I didn't realize how much that was my motivation. You know, you always think like, of course, I play my drums. I go in my studio and I play gigs or whatever. But that constant practicing, I guess there are some people who are still doing it, but that constant practicing, that's not really happening for me. When you don't know when the next gig is, and even if you got some stuff, are we even going to be able to do it? Like, have you had things like that you had on the books and then they get canceled when you get next to it, or it's odd?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to keep myself like relatively healthy and sane more than like practicing the piano. But I'm exercising a lot,
Right.
trying to eat healthy, like just trying to clear my head, especially as the winter is coming. But yeah, I'm not practicing either. It's like I need a gig to practice for personally. I need something.
I hate to admit it. I really wish that I could just say, no, I practice every day for 3 hours just because.
I mean, that sounds good, but it's definitely not me either. I mean, because we are always practicing for something. I mean, usually I'm scrambling to learn the music for the next gig that I just finished something, and now next gig I'm playing someone's new original music at Smalls or whatever, and it's like it's a constant scramble, but it's exciting because it's like, all right, can I do this? Can I just switch gears from this to this to this and like pull it off every time and make it work?
Are there certain skills that you don't even know how to practice? That's what I've come across. Like, you know how to play your scales or drummer's rudiments or whatever. You practice this, but there's certain like interactions. Like I'll tell you one that I didn't think would be so weird. With everyone with the mask, it's hard to read a person's face when they're like happy or say go on to the next section. Or like, your face is covered.
I know. I had the exact same experience. I did this duo thing with Sullivan Fortner a few weeks ago. We were positioned like across from each other so we could see each other. And I realized, man, you rely on facial expressions for all these cues, especially if you're just kind of playing some tunes. You're not sure if you're going to take another chorus or not.
Right.
Like just seeing someone's eyes is really hard.
That don't work.
You can't read someone's eyes unless they do some crazy stuff with their eyes.
Yeah, it's really like, I told someone recently, like the face is like a chart. You can just read the chart, just keep your eye out. But with these masks, especially if they wear glasses or something, like it's over. It's a wrap.
Yeah, but it's funny. We never even thought about that before. We're learning new things because of the COVID era. Like all of a sudden you realize that someone's facial expressions are actually a part of how you kind of read musical interactions. I never even thought about that in my life.
I mean, I've always known that it was important. I didn't know that a mask would change that much. That was my, thing. Because a lot of times people don't have a chart, or even playing with David. I've played with David for years. I could usually look at him and he'll give me a look, and we'll know. Oh, all right, we're going to 4. But our first gig together was with Ray Gallen, and Dave was looking at me, and I didn't know what was going on, man. I don't think he did either. We kind of just had to do it through the music.
Yeah, it's tricky. But I mean, your question, that's a good one. There's certain things that people want to work on that are really hard, right? Like a feel is one that comes up often for me, especially with pianists, but I guess if it could be for any instrument. But people that know all the theory, they understand how to play all the chords, they get everything intellectually, but then it just doesn't feel quite right? It's like it's not completely off, but feel is kind of everything, right? Like
so much.
Like those same notes played by, a master, like they just feel so different. And that's a hard thing to teach someone to do because it's so intangible and like you can't learn it out of an exercise or like it's not a pattern. It's just, I guess it's subtleties in timing and articulation and dynamics, right? Like you could kind of say that that's what it is.
Right. But how are you working on that without working with other musicians now? Because a lot of that stuff for me was contingent on me playing with certain people, and like.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a sensitivity to like feeling out the vibe and sort of, being able to sort of place your notes in a room with other people in the right way that resonates, and it's like, yeah, how do you, but even with other music, I mean, maybe if you coach a group, you can be there with them all at the same time and you can kind of show them, oh, when you did this, you should have maybe done this instead or whatever. But
Over
it's
Zoom, coaching the
yeah.
group over. It's my worst nightmare.
No, you can't do it. Yeah, it's impossible. Yeah, it doesn't work.
Well, I won't hold you. Thanks for talking. It was good to play.
No worries, man.
Other day, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think this vaccine is gonna get us through it, or what?
Eventually, yeah. I just think people have to be patient about the rollout realistically, because they're talking about, they got to give it to first responders and really elderly people first. And man, it's got millions and millions of people in the country. So it looks like it's still going to be many months before us non-emergency people are going to get it, right? We're going to be the last to get it unless you have like a condition.
But if they were going to give it to you tomorrow, will you take it?
I mean, yeah, if it's been vetted by scientists, yeah. I mean, I'm
gonna see what happens to you first.
I mean, they've already done trials. I mean, it's scary because normally they have more time.
Exactly. I mean, this is the quickest vaccine. I mean, come on, this is crazy.
Right. So they did trials. Everything looks good. How do we know that like 5 years from now, all those people aren't going to develop some horrible condition? I mean,
I've seen movies that started like this.
Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, it's scary, but it seems like the choice is going to be get a vaccine and rejoin the world, or like just continue to quarantine, because people are going to have cards, and like you're not going to get into places if you don't have your vaccine. I mean, that's how I think it's going to be. It's going to.
Oh, wow. That I hadn't heard that one yet.
You need it.
You're going to have a card.
I mean, well, they're talking about having everyone have a printed card that states like when they got their vaccine, and so you can carry that with you in your wallet, and it reminds you.
So I can see some people counterfeiting the cards.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's going to happen.
Wow.
I think it's going to get better, but man, the winter's going to be tough because nothing's going to happen until at least spring at the earliest, as far as us getting a vaccine.
Are you going to see your family, or like what are you doing about that?
Nah, I mean, I've stayed away from my parents entirely. We did Thanksgiving on Zoom.
Yeah.
We're going to do the same for Christmas. I'm taking my immediate family just out of the city for a couple weeks. Like we're just getting away for Christmas, just to get away to a different, get out of the city. But
to be able to walk down the street without a mask on, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Just to do that a couple times. It feels nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So, and then that'll hopefully be enough to get us through the January, February, March when we're back in the city. Cause just got to make it through, and then there's a light at the end of the tunnel, I think.
As always, thanks for the support. Thanks for checking out the show. There's links in the description below. There's that little thing over there in the corner. Please scan that. Check us out. All your donations go to help us do what we're doing here, Purgatory Perceptions. And we'll see you next time. And now here's Adam to play us out. He's going to play a couple more tunes for us. And again, thanks for checking out the show. Later.